Welcome. I am so glad you're here on this continuing journey for us all. I hope you're having a good week, and I especially hope that you've been able to take advantage of these most magnificent autumn days, late autumn days, I should say. These unseasonably warm and sunny days have coincided with the height of the fall's colors, as the leaves on the trees have turned from green to brilliant yellows, golds, oranges, and reds. There have been moments when I actually gasped with pleasure and astonishment at the sheer beauty and majesty of the colors, illuminated by the equally brilliant sunshine. With these images in mind, and knowing that the leaves will completely fall off and the weather will turn chilly and wet momentarily, probably, let us take our first break to breathe. And as we always do, let us find the posture that is most conducive to this relaxed but attentive state, where we can just block out the world for a few moments and turn very much inward, but not self-concerned, just concentrating on this moment's breath coming in and going out of our bodies. And so I always close my eyes. You may just want to softly gaze at some point that does not evoke all kinds of responses in you, a kind of neutral point. And let us try to unkink and untense our bodies, starting from the very tops of our heads, going unfurrowing our brows, relaxing our ears, our jaws, even our noses. We might want to scrunch them up and let them go with the rest of our face. But our jaws is a very good place to release. Just let it hang. It's a hinge, after all. Just let it hang. Because if it does, then we can't clench our teeth. We can't purse our lips. We have to just let go. And let go of our tongues. Allow our tongues just to sit comfortably in the bottoms of our mouths, kind of unformed and void, like creation. And then we move to our necks. That's where the kinks are. Noisy. And we might do a circular motion in one direction, perhaps then in another. Let's scrunch up our shoulders all the way to our ears, and then let them go. As we release our arms also, and elbows and forearms, twirl our wrists, wiggle our fingers. Just be kind of silly about it and let them rest in our laps. And then we return to our insides, our chests, our digestive systems. Let us release our tummies. You know, I'm always hanging on to it for one reason or another. Let us release for just this moment. And with it, our waists and our hips. And allow the tops of our legs to sit just undisturbed on our seats, to sit released on our seats. And we could wave back and forth our knees, our lower legs, twirl our ankles, just like we do with our hands, wiggle our toes, but plant our feet firmly in front of us. And then let us concentrate as we inhale a long, deep, full breath. And imagine it filling our whole bodies, going all the way up to the tops of our heads, down to our fingertips, filling our bellies that are now released so that the air can fill them. Going into our legs, our knees, our ankles, our toes. And when we've filled up completely and paused for a moment to enjoy it, let us release that breath. Now, in the time it takes me to describe what we could be doing, or the images that might help us, you would probably breathe 3 or 4 times. So yeah, you don't want to try to keep pace because it doesn't work that way. You want to establish your own pace. And hopefully what I'm sharing with you just enhances your abilities, or your experience doesn't detract from it. Let's breathe in again. Filling up. And even as we do, I can imagine at this very moment, the leaves twinkling in the sun. Twinkling isn't the right word. Ruffling in the sun. I can breathe in that beauty and let it fill me, and then release. And we can do it one more time with any image that is present right here, right now. And then we release. This season brings with it not only all of the Jewish fall holidays, but with the celebration of the last of this season's holidays, that of Simchat Torah, we end the Torah and begin it all over again. Thus, this last Shabbat, just passed, was designated as Shabbat Bereshit, the Sabbath of beginnings. That's what Bereshit means, in the beginning. The very act of beginning the Torah over again, year after year, provides a powerful message to our individual psyches and our existence as a people. For me, the message is, you can always begin again. It is never too late. No matter the failures you have endured, there is always hope. There is always another chance. Redemption is always possible. Even as starting over is what we enact year after year, the text itself, in the very first chapters of the book of Genesis, tells a more complex and nuanced story. We begin with the grandeur of God's creation in the beginning. We then move rapidly into the story of humanity, a story that is fraught with failings. In the aftermath of eating from the tree that was forbidden to them, Adam and Eve try to hide from God. This is not possible, but God, nevertheless, asks them the question that haunts us still. Ayeka, where are you? God knows very well where they are physically, but even God, it seems, cannot read the heart of an autonomous human being, even one of God's own creation. This is perhaps the primary existential question. Where are you? As Rabbi Richard Address points out, it is the question we must answer throughout our lives. He writes, God's first question to humanity is, Ayeka, where are you? We have just spent days from Elul through the High Holy Days and Sukkot. A message embedded in the liturgy of these holy days is part of the challenge of this question from Genesis. We are called every day to seek an answer to that basic question of where are you? This is an existential question related to our own spiritual growth and in our relationships with people, with God, and our own self. This is also a lifelong challenge. All of us are in constant transition. Change is part of being human. At every moment, the cells and fabric of our bodies are changing and evolving. So is our soul. How we answer the question of Genesis will vary as we traverse life's stages. But as the chapter raises the biblical author's understanding of our own mortality, the Ayeka question also opens us to the major existential questions of each of our lives. Questions such as, why was I born? Why must I die? Why am I here? What is the meaning of my life? Does God exist? Does it matter? For something of a change of pace, and because there are so many serious questions circulating in the world right now, that I am having difficulty focusing on the question of Ayeka, where are you? I thought that I would share with you a story, a somewhat whimsical, somewhat humorous, but still serious story about Adam. It was created by Rabbi Mark Gelman as a modern midrash, a modern interpretation or insight into one of the earliest stories in the book of Genesis. I like to think of it as whimsical wisdom. In the middle of the Garden of Eden, there was a big tree that had on it a big sign with big letters. Don't even think of eating the fruit from this tree. Of course, when Adam and Eve ate from the fruit of that tree, God kicked them out of the garden right away, which proves that if God puts up a sign, you'd better read it. Life outside the garden was pretty hard. In the garden, most every tree had fruit. Most every day was sunny, and most every animal was nice. But outside the garden, lots of trees had bugs. Lots of days were cold, and lots of animals wanted to bite, sting, or squash Adam and Eve. Because of all the hard, cold, biting stuff that was outside the garden, Adam was sure that God lived only inside the garden. Adam was sad about not living near God anymore. But most days, Adam was just too busy to be sad. Adam had to spend a lot of time in the fields plowing and sowing seed and keeping the weeds away and watching out for animals with sting or bite potential. But whenever Adam wasn't busy, he was sad, really sad. In the garden, Adam would sometimes sit all day talking to God. Adam would talk to God about the sky and the water, about the mountains and the valleys. But the thing that Adam talked about most with God was his feelings, Adam would see a beautiful sunset, a perfect flower, a fine spider web, a bird with colored feathers, or a little fish in the pond. And then Adam would smile that huge smile that seemed to come from his toes and wrap around his face and make his whole body shine. And Adam would try to explain to God just how he felt, seeing such beautiful things all around him. Sometimes Adam could not find the right words to explain how he felt, and he would just throw up his hands and ask, God, do you know how I feel? Then God would answer in a still, small voice, I know how you feel. Then God would kiss Adam with a breath of wind, and the two of them would go their separate days. Would go their separate ways until the next day. Now that Adam was outside the garden, he remembered those talks with God. He was afraid that they would never happen again, and he was very sad. One day in the fields, Adam saw a sunset that was pretty. It was not quite as red and purple and orange and yellow as the sunsets in the garden, but it was nice. Adam threw up his hands and hollered into the sky, God, do you know how I feel? But Adam heard nothing. And another day, Adam came upon a flower. There were not as many flowers outside the garden, but this was a beautiful red one with yellow inside. Adam smelled the flower and smiled. Adam shouted, God, do you know how I feel? But still, Adam heard nothing. One morning, Adam came upon a spider web, and though it was not as big and fine as the spider webs in the garden, it was covered with dewdrops that sparkled in the morning light. Adam cried, God, do you know how I feel? But Adam heard nothing. One day, Adam saw a flock of geese flying somewhere, and he yelled at the geese, come back here, birds. Tell me where you are going. Tell me about the sky and what it's like to fly, and how it is to live in a place with no walls. And I will tell you how I feel. But the geese didn't stop, and Adam heard nothing but their honking as they flew off into the gray sky. Then one day, Adam came to the edge of a clear pond. Near the water's edge, there was a school of little fish swimming around. Adam sat down on a rock, put his head into his hands, and started to cry. First, it was a little cry, but soon his whole body was heaving and shaking, and his tears were dripping into the pond like rain. Each teardrop scared the little fish as it hit the water, but they swam back to him when the water became still again. Soon Adam stopped crying. He looked at the fish and said nothing. Just then, the sun came out from behind a cloud, warming his face. A breath of wind blew against his cheeks and dried his tears. And all of a sudden, a still, small voice said, I know how you feel. God, is that you? Adam asked. Do you live out here? God said, I live everywhere. You let me in. I called to you so many times, Adam said. Why didn't you answer me? God said, I was always answering you. It's just that outside the garden, you have to listen a little harder to hear me. Things are not as quiet out here. I miss the garden, said Adam. I know how you feel, said God. I am sorry I had to kick you out. Everything was good there, but maybe it was too good. The garden was a little small, and you didn't have to work for anything. Even though things are harder outside the garden, you will appreciate what you have. Also, there are no walls out here, and you are needed to make things grow and work. Being in a place that's perfect may not be as good for you as being in a place where you are needed. Outside the garden, your children's children's children can grow up and spread out and fill this great big earth. Come to think of it, I'm not really sure which is better, being in the garden or being outside the garden. Then Adam smiled and said to God, I know just how you feel. And God kissed Adam with a breath of wind. Let us take our second break to breathe. And let us concentrate on this is how we feel right now. And we might even imagine that that loving wind is the breath we are inhaling and sending to touch every part of us lovingly, compassionately, understandingly. Taking this breath is probably the most basic wonderment in which we can engage. Being in a place that's perfect may not be as good for you as being in a place where you are needed. Outside the garden, your children's children's children can grow up and spread out and fill this great big earth. Come to think of it, I'm not really sure which is better, being in the garden or being outside the garden. Then Adam smiled and said to God, I know just how you feel. And God kissed Adam with a breath of wind. I wish you a good week, a week of continuing to enjoy the wonders of God's world, as I'm sure some rain will fall, which is also part of that wonderment. May you be strong and healthy and full of wonder. See you next time. God bless.